Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and apologies for the slight delay in proceedings. We had a couple of audio issues to sort out, but we are here for round 3 of the Touring Car Championship here at Anglesey this evening. This is the random track that has been selected for us, and we have just under 10 minutes to go in qualifying. Barry Clayton currently leads with a very impressive time of 1 minute 29.9, and he is looking fairly comfortable. Has been on pole, provisional pole, at least for a little while now. His nearest rival being Greg Young, who we should be able to go on board with in just a second. Yes, he is posted a 1:30.8 in the Juliet TCR. Obviously, very technical and very famous circuit I enjoy quite a lot is the Anglesey circuit. You have the technical sections right down through the Rocket and through Peel, followed by a very, very long straight hairpin that we might see some overtaking opportunities taking advantage of, followed by some more long straight. So a fairly high-speed circuit for these touring cars here. Top speed's about 135 miles an hour for some drivers. That is Alan Matthews, who's gone 135 through the speed trap there, 134 for Barry Clayton, our provisional pole sitter. Currently only got 5 cars on the board at the moment, but I can say that there are actually 8 competing. Matt Daly has just joined the session. A bit of a Matt Daly qualifying special, I think, is about to take place, where we don't see too much until the very end. We have just over 5 minutes remaining now, and we should see Matt Daly join in and get some laps under his belt in just a moment. We have a fairly even split. No, apologies, that was I was misreading that there. But we have a couple of AM drivers in for the thing. Paul Milman currently sat on top in the AM running between him and Steve Knight. Steve Knight once again going for that alternate strategy of the super soft tyres, see if we can make those work through the race distance. But they should certainly benefit him regardless. Alan Matthews actually posting 10 laps on the board in this 25-minute session. Very impressive stint there. As he is currently on the car improvement, so we'll actually go on board with him. He is going green through the middle sector, losing out in the first sector in comparison to Barry Clayton, so that's one that he has to watch out for. Only by about 10th, the gap though is standing at about 9/10, so he wants to try and find every single little bit of time as he can if he wants to try and catch up, riding over the curbs. I believe it was my second ever commentary was here at Anglesey, or perhaps my first may have been Anglesey actually. That very well could have been the first. And that curb there coming out down towards the banking is very, very tricky indeed. In fact, no, it wasn't towards the banking at all, but very tricky indeed, where you've got a few cars trying to overtake, and four doesn't go into one, unfortunately, and there's quite the number of incidents going to occur there. As we're on board now with Greg Young, who's currently P3 in the running at the moment. A bit of a slow, I believe he's on now, actually. So it's a bit of a slow sector 1, but no major concerns there. Just over 5 minutes to go now, and we have still the same 8 cars looking to compete for that spot on the front row of the grid. Unfortunately, I wasn't there, but I hope you all very much enjoyed National Alpha Day. Had to go on that Pirelli Sim Racing rig as well, the F1 simulator. A bit of practice perhaps for the single-seater championship, which we have just enjoyed last week. Very close battle going on between Greg Young is on top as we speak, because it's a 130.7 for Alan Matthews. Actually, I was about to say that's very close indeed, but I can tell you that Alan Matthews is 130.75, so still very close, but not quite as close as the game is making it out to be. Eventually, I'm just going to have to concede defeat. Yes, the old girl keeps on going. 7-year-old graphics card, that is. It's actually a Bitcoin mining recovery card. It was once used for Bitcoin mining, so it already had a hard life before it had overclock it, which is very professional. That is for sure. Let's go away, please. Settings menu. Yes, thank you very much. As we have the two front runners with just under 5 minutes to go in the pits at the moment. The fastest car on track at the moment. I think that is a complete lie. I believe he's just leaving the pits. No, he's... Okay. The timing tower just had a small aneurysm, but is back with us now. It was telling me that Barry Clayton was about to enter the second sector, but that certainly isn't the case. As we can see, we'll go back aboard with Alan Matthews. As he is currently about to start an outlap, I believe, or no, coming towards the end of an outlap even, or no, he's coming towards the end of a fast lap, losing out from the first and second sector, but we'll go on board with Greg Young actually, because according to the time tower, he is coming to the end of a lap. No, he is not. Anyway, I'll just refresh that page there. I've just noticed. Unfortunately, we'll have to wait until we can hop on board with Matt Daly. We're on board with Greg Young at the moment, as he is on his outlap at the moment, as things start to hot up now for the very end of the qualifying session. There is Matt Daly, just in case you're listening. Was that Matt Daly or that James Atkins? No, it is Matt Daly. Just have to double check there. But there is Matt Daly on for a fast lap at the moment. His time at the moment is 1.5, losing out through the first sector this again. Often we find that the environments we're racing in the Alpha Racing Leagues are somewhat incongruous with what's going on in real life. You know, maybe winter in the middle of summer. I think that's more an issue on my end, or maybe showing blistering sun when that isn't the case. But I can tell you, living somewhat closer to Anglesey, that I presume it is looking this beautiful indeed. In real life, track temperature 37 degrees, environment temperature 26 degrees. So pretty ideal conditions on the tarmac for these drivers for this evening. It is still Barry Clayton who sits on provisional pole at the moment. That pole by the lap looking slightly less provisional. 129.9 is where he stands at. It's a phenomenal lap. Unfortunately, we went on board with him to catch it over to the issues we were having, but let's see if anyone can challenge that at the back end. Locking up there on Greg Young's car, and he comes towards the end of his outlap and gets ready to set one of the, or what will be the final fast lap attempt for Greg Young now. So we'll stay on board with him as he is trying to catch up to the car up in front. That is Barry Clayton. Tell you what, we'll switch between Alan Matthews and Greg Young. These three cars in the fight for the pole here. Andrew Rammer actually making nice improvements through Sector 1. So things really hotting up at this stage in qualifying as Alan Matthews makes a small error there. And there's a fairly big error for Greg Young on his very last fast lap attempt. It's all gone wrong and he has to abandon that lap. So we'll carry on board with Alan Matthews. He's come towards the end of Sector 2 now. What will it be? He's lost out big time through Sector 2 owing to that error there, and that has pretty much brought an end to his qualifying. So we'll go on board with Andrew Brammer then as he comes towards the end of his lap, losing out through Sector 2, but making it up through Sector 1. Perhaps there's only one way to find out, and that is to stay in tune, or stay tuned in with him rather, as he comes towards the end of the lap now. Only got the bus stop corner to navigate now. A small lock up there. Will that cost him on the run down to the start-finish line? We'll find out in just a moment, ladies and gentlemen. And it is a 1:31.5 for Andrew Brammer there. Not enough for an improvement, unfortunately, there. Alan Matthews does improve in the end with a blistering final sector. Wasn't expecting that. It doesn't quite bring him close enough to Barry Clayton. In fact, he doesn't improve, but he damn near matches his previous best, a 1:30.78 compared to his previous best at 1:30.75. Yep, that's Sector 3 on his personal best, on his previous best lap. That would have been phenomenal for Alan Matthews there, but too little too late, unfortunately, for some drivers, which brings us neatly into race 1 coming up in just a few minutes' time. Don't go anywhere. are lined up on the grid, ready for the start of race 1 here at Anglesey. It is Barry Clayton who sits on pole, Alan Matthews P2, Greg Young P3, Andrew Brammer, the car we're on board with now, P4, James Atkins P5, Matt Daly P6, which is shortly not going to get confusing into turn 1 at all. Look at the two of those cars, very luminous yellow there, should be confusing at all. Paul Millman P7, Steve Knight P8. In fact, Jack Hodson has jumped in P7, Steve Knight P8, and then I believe Rob Whitney is on board with us as well. Which is good to see. So all the cars lined up on the grid now, only 20 seconds to go until lights out. We start to hear those revs rise as the drivers start to think about their launch, start to anticipate the getaway from the line, and the run down into turn 1. Wait, and the revs, full chat there, 6 red lights on the gantry, and we are away. It looks like Alan Matthews has just about beaten Barry Clayton off the line there, as far as I can work out. Unfortunately, we are slightly further down the order than what we would usually like to be, but we'll try and get that resolved in just a second. There we are, as we see Barry Clayton now in P2, owing to that good getaway that Alan Matthews was enjoying at the start of this race. Greg Young still in 3rd position, but a very, very impressive launch from Matt Daly this season, up into P4 already, so he is someone to watch out for in this race. We're already putting the pressure on Greg Young side by side here as we head through the right-hander. In fact, it's going to edge out in front ever so slightly. Has the braking zone to negotiate. Both cars getting a little bit upset under braking, as is of course the nature of a front-wheel drive touring car, but is able to get back on track and carry on. Still side by side then. They've lost time compared to the two front runners there, Alan Matthews, Barry Clayton. Those two haven't traded positions yet, although don't be surprised if a bit of a battle begins to form up between them. So Matt Daly now on the defensive, and speaking of on the defensive, it is Alan Matthews trying to defend from Barry Clayton. Barry Clayton wants that first position back as we have the first run down here now, and it looks like Alan Matthews has just about got the upper hand as we head into the hairpin and is going to stay in front for the time being. Likewise, Barry Clayton able to box Greg Young off as we see Andrew Brammer defending against Jack Hodson. Paul Millman has James Atkins for company, and then Steve Knight heading through the hairpin too. So Alan Matthews now on the second long straight before the run through the bus stop, still very much under pressure from Barry Clayton here. Barry Clayton thinking about a move up the inside potentially. The door was certainly wasn't open, but it was left. The door was left too, shall we say. There was a bit of room there that he could just about squeeze a nose in, or have a look up the inside, but it wasn't enough for an overtake. So Alan Matthews teasing Barry Clayton to tempt him into an erroneous move. Eventually, didn't get my words out. As we see the front runners starting to build up a bit of a gap between each other now, and Jack Hodson building up a bit of a gap between his wheels and the ground. Very impressive acrobatics on display from that Giulietta TCR there. James Atkins now putting pressure on Paul Millman up in front. Let's see, looking up the inside there, that was James Atkins, just about defended enough from Paul Millman though, so no overtake there just yet. Meanwhile, Barry Clayton only a few tenths behind Alan Matthews as we continue on now. In just a second we'll have the run through the Tom Price straight once again, and I feel like this could be his next kind of big opportunity here before the Rocket left-hander, or maybe not the Rocket left-hander. Where else could he? Yeah, I suppose Rocket is probably a very good opportunity for him to try and get a move done, as something has gone wrong for Paul Millman, and that is what has gone wrong. He's facing the wrong way and is off the circuit, so he's going to have his work carried out as he tries to claw his way back through the AM running there. James Atkins, meanwhile, promoted up into 7th position. The gap then down the start-finish straight, just starting to build up ever so slightly now. Apologies, the audio levels appear to be all over the shop, because what was very quiet in qualifying now appears to be much louder according to what I've got on the screen in front of me, so apologies if that's the case. I'll try and mend that if possible. But Alan Matthews then still leading at the moment, the gap standing at about half a second, so yo-yoing between these two drivers, a bit of a concertina effect as we enter the corners. So Barry Clayton very much pulling out all the stops here, very much bringing out that Giulietta TCR for everything that it has got, but unfortunately for him, it's not quite enough just yet. Setting a purple sector 1 though, he means business, that is for sure. And now we have the left-hander turning back on itself, of course, before you have the run down towards Peel, and all this battling has allowed Matt Daly to catch up. Matt Daly, having leapfrogged Greg Young, is now all of a sudden very much on the rear wing of Barry Clayton now. Well, not quite yet, but is about to be in just a few seconds as we see them running down towards the Tom Price Straight once again, trading purple sectors as they go along. For some reason, it happened in qualifying as well. Matt Daly has consistently been setting red sectors, which indicates a huge loss. I can tell you that is very much not the case, given that he is doing quite a good job of catching up to the two front runners here. But we'll have to see how he progresses in this race using our eyes. As the front runners just getting faster and faster by the looks of things. Back end of Alan Matthews' car potentially looking a little bit dynamic there. But onto the third lap now. 135 miles an hour through the speed trap for all of these front runners here. And a very impressive 1 minute 30.1 for Alan Matthews and 1 minute 30.4 for Barry Clayton. That is the lap that Alan Matthews wanted in qualifying. It didn't come to him in the correct session, but it came to him here in race 1. He's leading, and that's all that matters. Of course, as famously said in F1, the points only come on Sunday. The points only come in the races here. So let's see what Barry Clayton can do to try and catch back up to Alan Matthews if he can. Personal best around the rest of the field as well, it must be said, and the track really starting to ramp up now. The fuel loads getting lighter, and the driver's getting more confident as well as we head further into this race, heading around the right-hander here on the run down towards Peel. The gaps getting closer and closer between Barry Clayton and Matt Daly. We'll have to watch out and see what stops he can try and pull to find his way past Barry Clayton in just a second here. A bit of a lock-up for Alan Matthews up in front, cutting onto the grass as well. Of course, the Julietta TCR is famous in the past couple of seasons worth of running. Famous for the fact that they can also be used as a rallycross car, as some drivers have found out on a few occasions in quite a few races, which is good to see as well. They've got a wide range of usabilities, have these Juliettas. Often a bit of a criticism of the Mito, the fact that you can only have it as that two-door. One of the Alpha podcasts I watch actually the fantastic debate involving David Faithful about how the Julietta would be far cooler if it was a three-door, and I agree, but less practical, admittedly. As we see, that's not really the most important topic right now. What is the fact that is that Matt Daly? Yes, it is. I thought for a second it might have been James Atkins, but no, it is Matt Daly doing his best to keep up behind Barry Clayton here, as he had a fairly substantial lock-up heading into the banking there, but has been able to carry on and is still very much hot on Barry Clayton's heels now. Looking up the inside potentially here. No, he's potentially thinking about the long way around. He's got the pace for it by the looks of things. We're going to have the heavy braking zone into the rocket now. He's got the inside here, but it's just a little bit too far back to try and get that move done. But Barry Clayton goes wide. He goes wide. Has he too late on the brakes potentially, or just kind of messed up corner entry? But for whatever reason, that has allowed Matt Daly to fairly easily swoop past there, and I'm sure he's very happy with that indeed. Lock up from the back axle for Barry Clayton, but that doesn't matter to him. All he cares about is the fact that he is now in second position and can focus on trying to catch up to Alan Matthews, the next car up in front. Meanwhile, further down the grid, we have Andrew Brammer and Greg Young battling out. Andrew Brammer showing some impressive pace throughout this weekend so far, and is within a second of Greg Young now. So Greg Young dropping off from that front, from that top end of the battle, unfortunately for him, but I'm sure he's getting ready to enjoy a battle with Andrew Brammer coming up in just a second here. How far away are we from that? Not far away indeed. If we compare their best laps, they are within a tenth of each other. 131.0 for Greg Young, 131.1 for Andrew Brammer. And then if we look at their previous laps, it is a nice 1 minute 31.1 for Andrew Brammer, and then 1 minute 31.8 for Andrew Brammer, and 1 minute 32.1 for Greg Young there. Numbers changing as we go, of course. But it is still Alan Matthews who leads this race at the moment, but by only just under a second. So Matt Daly really putting the work in now behind the wheel of that Julietta TCR. His previous lap 1 minute 30.6, meanwhile Alan Matthews 1 minute 31.1. So what behind though, Barry Clayton 1 minute 30.4, his best lap, but he's just gone purple through the first sector, and Matt Daly's had a bit of an error coming out of the rocket there. I think he hit a curb and has hit one of those, well, it was made infamous in last season's touring car running, one of those voids that is just unavoidable, if you will, and the car kind of got a little bit upset by that, but has been able to carry on, lost a bit of time, but has been able to carry on regardless. Meanwhile, Andrew Brammer dropping off the back of Greg Young's car ever so slightly, but still very much in the battle here, as the main battling going on at the top end of the field between Matt Daly, Alan Matthews and Barry Clayton. Barry Clayton has done a very good job actually on this lap. Has just settled down and put some impressive pace behind him on the past few sectors. So in a second we may see him kind of re-energised and back in this battle for the lead of the race, all of a sudden, which is good to see. Excellent racecraft from Barry Clayton. Heading through the rocket once again, it is still Alan Matthews who leads from Matt Daly and Barry Clayton. Matt Daly has been threatening Alan Matthews for quite a while now, has been very much filling up that rear view mirror, I can imagine, looking quite intimidating in that luminous yellow while he does so. Of course, distinguishing factor, which is something that I still very much need to learn, which you may have not have noticed, between the two Juliettas of Matt Daly and James Atkins are the pink roll cage and wheels in James Atkins' car, the very neon pink wheels indeed. Very luminescent cars overall, really, as we have the run down the straight once again, and it is still Alan Matthews who is not cracking under pressure so far. Russell has done a very impressive job. A bit of lock-up from Matt Daly's car. I think, was it Brands Hatch last year? I think or the Brands Hatch last year when we were in the TCRs. And whatever setup Matt Daly had on his TCR, I think we were using a different mod at that point, but it was just lock-up central for the back axle. And it seemed to work because he was very much on the pace indeed, as he is in this race at the moment. Only 0.2 of a second between him and Alan Matthews now. But the car was, in fact, something's gone wrong with Alan Matthews. There, has he ran a little bit wide, ran onto the dirt? I'm not quite sure what that was, but it seemed to come out of absolutely nowhere, and he lost a fairly substantial amount of pace as a result of it. Now we head into the rocket with Matt Daly leading this race. A small lock-up from him. As I was saying, Matt Daly seems to be the king of lock-ups at Brands last year. I distinctly remember the back end getting really quite upset, but it was he was one of the quicker drivers in the field, so he didn't harm him too much. But that certainly harmed Alan Matthews, though. Quite a loss in pace owing to that small error there. I'm sure he'll be kicking himself because now he's under pressure from Barry Clayton. Barry Clayton doesn't care about which car he has to overtake first. He doesn't care if it's Matt Daly or Barry Clayton. All he cares is that he wants to overtake two cars to try and take the lead in this race. So he's going to, I imagine, resume as normal and try and find a way past Alan Matthews now. That is a bit of a disaster for Alan Matthews. Halfway into this race, unfortunately for him, and it's all gone wrong so far. I say all gone wrong. He's still sat in P2 at the moment, which will work wonders for his championship charge. He is currently second in the standings with 66 points on the board. His main rival really is Matt Daly, who leads the championship at the moment on 93 points. John Cole is currently not present, and he is third in the championship with 55 points. And we have a fairly nice symmetrical run down. Nathan Birch 44, Jordan Practically 43, very close indeed, both of those not present. Andrew Brammer should make a fairly substantial gain this evening, 20 points on the board for Andrew Brammer. And then we have James Atkins 7th, Will Inglis 8th, Greg 9th, John Baker 10th, Andrew Whitehead 11th, and Barry Clayton 12th. Actually this will do a very nice job of picking Barry Clayton up some points, unless something goes wrong. He's been a bit short on luck at the moment, has Barry Clayton, so hopefully he can get some points on the board this evening, which would be nice to see. Meanwhile, in the AM running, it is Paul Millman who leads from Rosie Hobson, who is present this evening. Rob Whitney has been trying to join, but unfortunately has had a couple of technical issues by the sounds of things, and is currently tied for points with Jack Hodson. So Jack Hodson should be leapfrogging him to third in the AM Championship. Steve Knight should collect some points as well, currently on 24, should be able to collect some points as he is leading the AM running at the moment. Speaking of leading, it is Matt Daly who still leads the pro running and is about a second and a half clear of Alan Matthews, the car behind there, and he has settled in nicely to his position in the lead of this race. His previous lap, a 1 minute 29.9, the best lap of the race so far, of course. Alan Matthews posting 1 minute 30.1 that time around. Has registered him as the fastest lap, I believe, but it is 1 minute 29.9 to Matt Daly, unless he had a fairly substantial cut there. But Alan Matthews is certainly doing his best to try and keep Barry Clayton behind. In fact, all three of these drivers consistently in the low 130s, so very evenly matched indeed, which is good to see. Should provide some interesting battling heading into the final stages of this race when things start to pick up once again, with the fuel loads getting lighter and the pressure starting to pile on for some drivers. As Matt Daly will be piling some pressure into his tyres, heavily braking into the rocket, a bit of a lock-up, and then riding over the curb and ending up on two wheels. Did a very nice job to not get too upset with the car and was able to carry on with no major loss in time. In fact, his gain fell substantially on this lap, now about 2 seconds ahead of Alan Matthews, who's about a second ahead of Barry Clayton. In fact, the entire field spread out fairly nicely indeed as they begin to settle in to a spot on the circuit that they feel comfortable occupying in their nice kind of little zones where they can set in and start setting some decent time without too much to worry about in the form of battling. Threatening lap by lap to think about an overtake on Alan Matthews. It hasn't happened just yet, unfortunately for him. Sat on the podium, I'm sure he's happy to be here given how the season has started for him. But he wants, I'm sure, having sat on pole at the end of qualifying, I'm sure he wants to try and find a way past Alan Matthews there, running a little bit wide on the exit, the run down the Tom Price straight now. The hairpin to navigate, and there is Matt Daly up in front with some lap traffic, I believe. I believe that is the car of Paul Millen up in front of him. Yes, it is, as we rejoin once again. Not, of course, going to take away too much from the lead battle going on. Don't want to pull a Monza 2021 and focus on some lap traffic when the results play for up on the front end of the field. But Alan Matthews is doing a very nice job of keeping Barry Clayton behind so far. Too much for him or see too much for him rather, but he finds his way up into the top end of the midfield and just starts setting consistent laps without too much to worry about in terms of pressure, and it ends up with a nice haul of points. So hopefully all going well for him in this race, but all might not be going well for Alan Matthews, at one point leading this race. Of course, the battle these two enjoyed at the very start is continuing on here, just unfortunately for them it's not for the lead of this race, but they're still going to fight for it regardless of that fact. The run down the Tom Price straight once again now, and it is Barry Clayton who wants to settle behind Alan Matthews once again. Looked very close run through field, but it wasn't to be, unfortunately, for Barry. As we see then, it is Greg Young sat in P5 at the moment. He is settled down into the midfield here, and Jack Hodson doing a very nice job of leading me and running. Of course, I did say Steve Jones running was leading the ball, but it is Jack Hodson who should be taking away a nice haul of points from this race. So we'll update you on the live championship standings as they continue on in race 2, and James Atkins in P7 at the moment, Steve Knight P8 and Paul Millen P9. The battle between these two continuing on, heading through the banking now, and it is Alan Matthews who leads these two by 7/10 of a second. see Matt Daly running down the Tom Price straight without too much in the way of a challenge at the moment, locking up ever so slightly. Those tyres probably feeling slightly challenged after a 25-minute race here at Anglesey, or 20 minutes worth of racing here at Anglesey. And there is, in the background there, the battle between Alan Matthews and Barry Clayton still going on as we head through the banking once again. This is going to be a very interesting phase of the race now for these two drivers. Of course, the fuel load getting lighter, lock up for Alan Matthews there. Could that be the type of mistake that Barry Clayton is trying to capitalise on? We'll have to stay tuned to find out. But of course, a very interesting phase of the race coming up now, because of course Barry Clayton wants to try and find a way past, but doesn't want to overexert his tyres, as he has, I'm sure, been on the verge of doing for quite a while now. The fuel load getting lighter will help him, and maybe if he has been preserving, which I strongly doubt given his impressive pace so far, he can start to use the entire tyre life that he has and really start to push. But of course, if Alan Matthews has been preserving, then he should be able to turn the heat up a little bit and break away in the final 5 minutes of this race. So all to play for between a few of these drivers now. As you see there, excellent camera angles showing from the rear view of the Giulietta of Matthews just how close Barry Clayton has been on so many occasions heading into these corners now. To be within a second for so long, a very impressive drive from both drivers here. In fact, I think everyone has led a very commendable race here, it must be said. No one's made any major errors from what I can work out. I think there's a bit of an unfortunate error for Paul Millen just at the very start of the race. There's something happened to Greg Young. Is that commentator's curse kicking in? Just as I was commending everyone on very few mistakes, potential mistake for Greg Young there, but Jack Hodson has found his way past. We've heard the last lap actually, 1:33 for Greg Young, so maybe has won at the time a little bit too much, or is just struggling with pace at this stage in the race, and that has allowed Jack Hodson leading the Amaring up into 5th at the moment, so doing a very nice job leading that race from P5 on the road. Heading up towards the rocket once again, it is still Alan Matthews who leads these two. It must be so frustrating for Barry Clayton to see that Auto Italia liveried car for so long, occupying his windscreen. Of course, it's no kind of enjoyable time for Alan Matthews, I'm sure, either, because he is giving everything he has got to try and keep Barry Clayton behind. He has not been allowed one moment of relief for any point of this race, really, has Alan Matthews. Barry Clayton doing a very good job, of course, to stay with him from the start of this race as well. These two, as we've said it before, really know how to battle each other, and they always seem to find each other. I said that I think it was last week or the touring cars a fortnight ago, but these two always seem to just do a very good job of finding each other and enjoying a cracking race between the two, which is provides excellent viewing as well. So no major complaints from that front if we continue to see these two battling it out for many races to come, which I'm sure you are as hopeful as I am that is the case. Riding over the curbs then, pushing the cars to their absolute limits, heading down into the banking now. Only half a second separating these two, as it has been for so long now. We're just under 2 minutes to go in this race, plus another lap. We've done 15 laps of Anglesey so far. Very historic, very well known, and very technical circuit indeed. Some of these, one of my favourite parts of the Touring Car Championship is the fact that we do stay on just British circuits, which is no major problem at all, because there are some fantastic circuits here in the UK that really deserve the airtime that they get. As we head through the rocket corner once again, it is still Alan Matthews who leads ahead of Barry Clayton. These two really not letting each other have one little momentary slip, because they're ready to pounce if that is the case. Of course, I'm very happy that we are on just British circuits for touring car, but it will also be quite fun to see these things at Monza or something like that. Just take the brake off, maybe put the blue spark on the engine, and see what it can do. Not that these need much blue spark, but just put one in anyway, so it'll be fun. Heading down into the bus stop once again, it is still Alan Matthews who leads these two. Coming up on some lap traffic in just a second, I believe that is Steve Knight. I was about to say first bit of lap traffic, but it should be second because Paul Millman is heading down the Tom Price straight at the moment. A bit of a weekend to forget for Paul Millman at the moment so far, unfortunately for him. We know he has the pace, but maybe the Carl circuit is not coming to him this weekend. Of course, one of the defining characteristics of the Touring Car Series this year is the fact that we don't quite know where we're going to be racing until the very last minute, which always adds a bit of an exciting twist into things for viewing and for the drivers as well. So as the timer hits 0, we are on board with Matt Daly as he comes towards the end of the penultimate lap of this race, and we're of course very aware of the fact that throughout all of this, Matt Daly and Barry Clayton are still battling with each other, but I think we're going to go on board with Matt Daly for a celebratory kind of parade lap to the end of what has been a fantastic race for Matt, really. Starting from quite far back down the order and able to join in and really dominating the race after the halfway mark. As he starts the final lap now, 1 minute 30.2 that time round. Very impressive lap indeed. I'm sure he's about to set another one as he rides onto the dirt. Actually, the Rallycross Giulietta making a return once again for Matt Daly, and I'm also very much looking forward to the victory celebration. I think it's been a little while now since, well, at least a fortnight since we've seen a Matt Daly victory celebration. So it'll be good to see another one here at Anglesey as we are heading down through the church, well, the exit of the church really, and then we have what was probably considered a straight before you hit the rocket, but isn't much of a straight at all. A big lock-up into that corner. I'd love to know what shape those tyres are now, what shape they're in, both kind of metaphorically and literally, because they're probably more like a 50p piece at this stage in the race, especially by locking up here as we have the run down towards the Tom Price straight for one final time here in race 1. And of course, race 2, the reverse grid race, should be shaking things up in just a few minutes time when the drivers who came out on top in race 1 have to work a little bit harder through race 2 and fight their way through the field. So don't go anywhere, that coming up in just a few minutes time now. And for Matt Daly, it probably can't come quick enough because he's probably feeling quite confident as he heads into the bus stop for the final time here in race 1. It has been a fantastic drive, starting from fairly far down the grid and fighting his way through the fields to come across the line and take the race 1 victory. Congratulations, Matt Daly, for a fantastic drive to start off the racing action here at Anglesey. And we'll go on board with you in just a second. Something's happened to Barry Clayton. He's dropped off the back, but the order doesn't change here. Alan Matthews comes across the line to take home P2, second spot on the podium there, and then Barry Clayton rounds out the podium. So commiserations to Barry for losing out in that battle in the end, but fantastic drive nonetheless to come home with a podium, and that should help you in the championship standings. Andrew Brammer, fantastic drive for him so far this race, will be coming home P4. And Jack Hodson actually seemed to have a fairly decent amount of patience because he wasn't too far behind Andrew Brammer, unfortunately for him. So maybe just a few more minutes he could have caught up. But Jack Hodson leading that AM race is going to take the AM race victory and come home with P5 here. Greg Young will be rounding out the field with a P6, and then James Atkins in just a moment will be coming home P7. Steve Knight classified P8, Paul Millman P9. So fantastic drive all around really for a number of drivers there. We'll join you in just a few moments time for the reverse grid race. For the reverse grid action should be plenty of excitement coming up in just a moment. back to the action here at the Anglesey circuit, ladies and gentlemen, for race 2, the reverse grid race. We've got just over 30 seconds until lights out, so I'll very quickly give you the grid rundown. It is James Atkins, sat on pole, Greg Young P2, Andrew Rammer P3, Barry Clayton P4, Alan Matthews P5 and Matt Daly P6 for the pro runners. And then Paul Millman sat on pole for the AM runners, Steve Knight P2 and Jack Hodson P3. So just over 10 seconds. It should be a very exciting race indeed. The dynamic turns on its head a bit. We know Greg Young and James Atkins, in fact all of the pro runners, have a decent amount of pace underneath them, so it shouldn't be particularly easy for the rest of the field to find its way up front. We have 6 red lights on the gantry and we are away. Fantastic getaway for Greg Young this time round, and I believe that means that James Atkins has lost out a little bit. Yes, he has, heading in to the first corner. The back end of Alan Matthews' car stepping out substantially, but has been able to carry on with no major ill effects there, which is good to see. But Greg Young currently leading this race after a fantastic getaway here. Who has gone wide there? That is James Atkins, I believe. That is a disaster for him after a fairly decent start and after race 1 to forget. Unfortunately, race 2 looks to be going the same way as well. Alan Matthews will be very happy with what's going on here. He's just within half a second of Greg Young and is in P2 at the moment. Has had a fantastic getaway. Likewise, Matt Daly, of course, starting from 6th on the grid, back end of the pro runners, finds himself in P3, heading through the rocket already. As that's Steve Knight going a little bit wide there, I think it is. Luckily able to rejoin in a relatively safe manner there without causing any major collisions or anything like that. But Greg Young leading as we see Alan Matthews doing his best to keep up. Matt Daly P3, lock-up for Matt Daly, the traditional Matt Daly lock-up now, and Andrew Rammer in P4, Barry Clayton P5. Alan Matthews heading down the Tom Price straight has found his way past, heading through the banking now. A lock-up of the as the back axle kind of stepped up the car like a tripod onto 3 wheels, just so taut and so race ready. Alan Matthews then heading into the final corner, the bus stop left-hander, and I believe that Greg Young is looking up the inside there. The door was left open wide enough from it. That was a fantastic move from Greg Young. He couldn't have left that any later if he tried. That was really brave from Greg Young, and it paid dividends. As we see, I believe Barry Clayton, his streak of luck, his streak of bad luck ended on the previous race, and has unfortunately continued on once again as he had to dive into the pits, I imagine, to serve a penalty, which rather puts a damper on things for him. But Alan Matthews has gotten a defensive drive of a life to pull off here, because he's got to keep Greg Young and Matt Daly behind now as we run down towards the rocket there. Near enough 3 wide at this very tight and twisty Anglesey circuit. But it is Matt Daly who worms his way up the inside there, rides over the curb, and a huge collision between Alan Matthews and Greg Young. I think Alan Matthews was trying to avoid the car of Matt Daly, which was slightly off track when it headed through the left-hander, and that meant that he had to turn right ever so slightly, but that put Greg Young on his side. That is a disaster for Greg Young as he has to dive into the pits, teleport, and is now, I believe, is he a lap down? I think he's now classified a lap down, or I'm not sure quite how that works, to be honest. I think, yeah, he is now deemed a lap down. That is a disaster for him in this race. But all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Andrew Rammer has found his way between these two and up into first position briefly, heading through the banking now. Will he be able to keep that? It's not the banking, rather. It is the hairpin. Apologies. Andrew Rammer now leading this race ahead of Alan Matthews and Matt Daly. Paul Millman leading the AM running has found his way up into P4. That is a fantastic effort from Paul Millman as we head through the left-hander once again. Going a little bit wide is Andrew Rammer. That allows Alan Matthews to go up the inside. So I'm going to put a bit of a repeat move of what Greg Young did just a lap ago. Unfortunately for Greg, that work all undone there. That is a bitter shame there. That could have been quite the battle forming up. As we see, late on the brakes, Alan Matthews tries to go the long way around. Andrew Rammer, of course, defending the inside line, but they're now near enough side by side. Alan Matthews just about edging in front, and is going to have to work for it really as he heads down towards the rocket, and that's not going to help things. Runs wide on the exit of Church, finds himself on the outside of the circuit and loses a huge amount of time as a result of it. Now Andrew Rammer has to defend from the might of Matt Daly. Matt Daly of course, starting P6 in this race all the way up into P2 already, dominated the end of the first race and is looking to try and do the same in this second race. But Alan Matthews has actually done a fairly decent job of catching up already within a second, given how much he slowed down. That is impressive. But Matt Daly now only 3/10 behind Andrew Rammer, so Andrew Rammer is really going to have to work for it if he wants to keep this race lead going for a little bit longer. The back end of Matt Daly's car really stepping out there, looked more rear-wheel drive in front as he headed down through Siemens, but has been able to carry on. Is near enough side-by-side heading into the braking zone, but is going to have to settle for P2 at the moment. That has, however, slowed him down. That's allowed Alan Matthews to catch back up and try and find a way past in just a moment's time. I'm sure he's going to try and get that move done. So Matt Daly really has his work out for him, actually, because on the previous lap, 135.04 Andrew Rammer, although that will update in just a second to 132.1 for Andrew Rammer and a 131.9 for Matt Daly. So they're near enough all on pretty much the same pace. Just want to shout out Barry Clayton, by the way, who's just put in a phenomenal lap. A 1:30.8, 2 purple sectors and a personal best on that previous lap. That's allowed him to catch up to Jack Hodson. Jack Hodson now leading the AM running. Not quite sure what happened to Paul Millman there. Once again, a race to forget, and overall a bit of a weekend to forget for him so far. But certainly not for Matt Daly. He's not going to forget this anytime soon, because it's still happening for him as he's still trying to find a way past Andrew Brammer now. A big lock-up heading into the Rocket Ball. We've seen this on a couple of occasions. Andrew Brammer really knows how to defend here, as we have the run down towards Peel coming up, and the gap looking a little bit bigger than it has on the past previous occasions. As we're going to go on board with Barry Clayton now. Barry Clayton will be finding his way past Jack Hodson. Of course, Jack Hodson is obliged to give up the position. I'm sure he wouldn't mind too much, and in fact that's just been made a lot easier. Apologies, Jack, that is the commentator's curse very much in full effect. I believe you will now be coming out battling with Steve Knight. So Steve Knight leading the the AM running at the moment, and Jack Hodson settling for P2 in the AM class. Meanwhile, Matt Daly desperate to find a way past now, I am sure. A big lock up there heading into the bus stop left-hander, and is still very close indeed. A 1:30.6 on that previous lap, ever so slightly faster than Andrew Brammer's 1:30.7. It seems to be that Matt Daly is not getting any of his lap times classified for whatever reason. So Andrew Brammer currently setting the fastest lap in the race so far, a 1:30.7. We may see those 1:29s reappear later on in the running, but Matt Daly desperate to find a way past. And all of a sudden, Matt Daly finds himself in P1. What has happened there? Andrew Brammer has gone off on the run up towards the Rocket. Has, unfortunately for him, a bit of an unfortunate circumstance there. Sees him now down in P6. The rest of the field actually quite close, and that has seen him dropping all the way down to P6 as Jack Hodson and that was Andrew Brammer battling it out there. Jack has to settle for P7. Meanwhile, Steve Knight doing a very good job leading that AM running in P5 at the moment. Of course, this racing made just a little bit more difficult. Not only is it Julietta TCR, not only is it the very technical Anglesey circuit, but that racing just made even more complicated by the sheer heat that I'm sure most of us are experiencing at the moment. The drivers are certainly feeling it, I'm certainly feeling it, and I'm sure you at home are feeling it as well. So good to see that the standing of racing is actually still very high and very competitive indeed, given the environment that we are working within now, as Alan Matthews settles for P2 at the moment, and the order at the front end of the field looking somewhat familiar if you're tuned into race 1. It is Matt Daly who leads, Alan Matthews P2 and Barry Clayton P3. We're going to have a repeat of race 1 by the looks of things. Barry Clayton fighting to try and find a way past that car up ahead of him. P6 at the moment, trying to keep Jack Hodson behind as Jack Hodson makes a look up the inside but a little bit too far back. It's like Jack Hodson, of course, desperate for Andrew to not be there, really not be in that position, because the lead of the AM running, currently being led by Steve Knight. Steve Knight actually doing a very nice job at the moment on 34.0 on the previous lap. That puts him near enough level pegging with Paul Millman at the moment. As Paul Millman, unfortunately, is going to have to try and work to catch the rest of the field once again. But I'm sure Jack Hodson would very much appreciate if Andrew Ram could get that overtake done and get it done fairly sharpish so that he can resume his battle for the lead of the AM running as we go on board with Alan Matthews once again, as he is fairly keen to keep Barry Clayton behind. As we see now, the gap between Jack Hodson and Steve Knight closing up. Andrew Rammer settling for P7 at the moment, which leaves these two front runners in the AM to continue on their battle, heading through the rocket now. Steve Knight on the defensive here as he positions his car pretty much perfectly there, heading down towards Peel in just a second. The back end bouncing, I think he might have hit a curb, and that slightly upset the rear of the car. But Steve Knight positioning his car very nice indeed there to try and make it just that little bit more difficult for Jack Hodson to find a way past. Heading through Siemens once again, and unfortunately commentator's curse very much in effect there. As Steve Knight, the back end kicks out away from this bit of a camber to that corner, which I think has caught a couple of drivers, or near enough caught a couple of drivers out. And unfortunately for Steve, that just so happened when he was embroiled in a battle for the lead of the AM running there. Andrew Ram doing a very good job to avoid that car kind of out of control there. But Steve Knight able to rejoin ahead of Paul Millman still, so he should be still fairly happy with his position in this race at the moment. Someone who isn't is Barry Clayton. Likewise for Alan Matthews, probably not very happy that he either wants to be in P1 or wants to be just a little bit clear, more clear of Barry Clayton, as they are only about 3/10 and 4/10 of a second apart at this stage in the race. A bit of a lock-up mid-car, looked a little bit untidy there, but he was able to carry on. As you see, I think that is Alan Matthews weaving to break the toe there. He's only 3 seconds behind Matt Daly, and of course if there's a small error from Matt Daly potentially, or if he has issues with lap traffic, you never know. Alan Matthews could still very much be in the fight for the lead of this race. Likewise for Barry Clayton. Of course, this is a marathon, not a sprint, and we're only halfway into this race so far. Of course, the 25-minute is more of a sprint race, really. But yeah, certainly not over yet for the likes of Barry Clayton, Alan Matthews. I mean, it certainly hasn't been, certainly wasn't over for James Atkins. Very start of this race, he had a bit of a disaster heading into turn one with his colour-changing wheels there. They are spectacular. I think that's probably, I don't know, sometimes I'm not too much of an expert on vehicle skins, but I imagine that's some sort of animation, glitch or whatever. But as soon as the wheels lock up, they change colour. That is a fantastic piece of kit there. Maybe if you took them off, you could be going even faster, James. Because I assume that's probably a bit weighty to have all that kind of paint spray and stuff on board the car. As you see, flames on the overrun there for James Atkins, but he had a bit of a disaster start to this race. He's worked his way up into P4, top of the midfield, so he's doing a very good job indeed. As we see, speaking of doing good job, as it's a bit of a deja vu from race one. This Barry Clayton against Alan Matthews doing his best to keep up, putting pressure on, but unfortunately for Barry, Alan just isn't quite cracking yet. And is ready to carry on, and that very neon green #1 plate liveried outfit is going to have to work a little bit harder to try and find a way past Alan Matthews. As I believe the commentator's curse potentially in effect here, as it is on so many occasions. James Atkins dropping back just a little bit now, so we see Jack Hodson leading the AM running from P4 on the road. That is very impressive indeed. That is seen James Atkins in P5 and Andrew Bramett in P6, so Andrew getting ready for a bit of a battle now with James Atkins, of course, sitting on the brakes, heading through the right hand of the inside tyre, lifts up and stops immediately. These cars are certainly a beauty to behold on the circuit. As flamed on the overrun once again before James Atkins, I believe he let off a little bit earlier than Andrew Bramett heading into the final corner. Has that cost him? As we run down the start-finish straight, we see that Andrew Bramett is able to hit the inside into turn 1 as well, so James Atkins wasn't able to even defend that. The door was open quite nicely for Andrew Bramett, and he said thank you very much and welcomed himself in to P5. Tracking opportunistic overtake from Andrew Bramett there, as we see Matt Daly currently leading this race at the moment. If I were the sponsors of Matt Daly, I would be best pleased, because he does such a good job out in the front usually that we don't tune in with him all that often, so he doesn't get that much screen time. But Alan Matthews then still P2, separated by about 0.3 of a second. This must be so frustrating for Barry Clayton. Of course, they are separated by only 0.3 in terms of last lap pace as well, so they are oh so near, but Barry Clayton doesn't seem to be able to get the overtake set up. He gets close to it, but doesn't seem to have the pace advantage, that huge pace advantage that you actually need to get the overtake done. Doesn't seem to be there yet, unfortunately, for him. Let's see what he can do. Let's see if he can force an error, or maybe take a bit of an opportunity, maybe a bit of bravery might come into play, and he might find his way past it in just a second. But we're on board once again with Andrew Bramett and Jack Hodson. Jack Hodson still leading these three, leading the AM running as well, of course, as we've already mentioned. Very impressive lead for him there. But James Atkins settling for P6 at the moment. That is one of the, I suppose, one of the benefits of a small field, is that the overtakes really do matter. I mean, P4 down to P6, there's a substantial difference in points for James Atkins here. He is, I'm sure, looking to try and settle into the final stage of this race, when things will begin to kick up once again, and try and work his way past if he can. Likewise for Barry Clayton, desperate to work his way past. I'm sure I've used that word a lot, because that, I imagine that's what he's feeling in this car, but must also be enjoying getting to race alongside Alan Matthews, as I mentioned, in race 1 he's very experienced in doing, and always puts on a good show when it's always, well, you know, it's always going to be a good show when these two are on track together. As we head into the final stages of this race, and of course drivers collecting points for race 1 as well. I can tell you that leading the pro running at the moment, it is Matt Daly, who extends his lead out to 118 points. Very impressive start to the season for him. Alan Matthews in P2 with 84, as he will be widening that gap to the rest of the field even more if he can keep Barry Clayton behind. Barry Clayton jumps up to 10th ahead of John Baker and Andrew Whitehead, up into the top 10 now for Barry Clayton, as Matt Daly posting 129.6 on that previous lap. That is a very competitive time indeed from him. But Barry Clayton now with 15 points on the board. Joe Cole still P3 for the time being. Nathan Birch P4. George Brook has to be P4 as well. But Andrew Bramett has made some gains as well. 32 points for Andrew Bramett. 28 for James Atkins. 24 for Greg Young. And then in the pro running, we see that it is Paul Millman who leads the pro running with 88 points on the board. Jack Hodson has now jumped up to P2 with 68 points. So this race will work wonders in catching him up to Paul Millman, as he has leapfrogged his sister, who's on 67 points. Rob Whitney fourth with 43. Steve Knight now 42 points on the board, so he is near enough tied with Rob Whitney, and Guy Thorpe P6 in the running at the moment. So this stage in the championship, all to play for, of course, and very close indeed between quite a few drivers, as it is very close between Alan Matthews and Barry Clayton, as has been for so long now. This has been a very impressive weekend for them both, given they're working in this heat, and given they have spent near enough 50 minutes worth of racing now within half a second of each other. It really is commendable. Speaking of within half a second, that is the gap between Jack Hodson and Andrew Bramett, as Andrew Bramett once again trying to find a way past Jack Hodson. Of course, this time it is for P4, so it matters just a little bit more now. It doesn't matter too much to Jack Hodson, because either way he's going to come away with the top scoring points in the AM running if the order between those three drivers stays the same. But he will, Andrew Bramett will be hoping to make some headway and try and make sure that he is clear and safe from the threat of James Atkins, the next pro runner behind.
as we go on board once again, on board with the battle between Jack Hodson and Andrew Brown. I wouldn't be surprised if at this point they have both realised. I can double check actually. I can check in the comms system. You can check actually if they are currently in communication with each other. I can tell you that they are not in communication with each other at the moment, unfortunately. Otherwise, they may have said, "Tell you what, we know we're in different classes, but let's enjoy a bit of a battle between each other." Strictly, technically, not really allowed within the regulations, but with no one else to really enjoy a battle with on track, I wouldn't be surprised if they decide to just kind of settle down and have some fun here at Anglesey. I'm sure no one will be too kind of against that. It is Jack Hodson who still leads to. Likewise, it is still Alan Matthews as they start a new lap, leading Barry Clayton. Barry Clayton closing up on the previous lap though, making 2/10 gain in terms of lap time that time round, and they are once again within half a second. The gap looked to be sitting at about a second at one point in the race. But now the fuel load getting lighter, the tyres haven't seemed to be too much of an issue this weekend, it must be said, especially for the likes of Matt Dane, who is, if we go on board with him now, will he be turning him into a cube as we speak? Yes, he will! That is a fantastic point at which to join Matt Dane there. That was a fantastic shot, actually. I'm going to have to go back and try and screenshot that if possible, because that looked very cool indeed, Matt Dane. Hopefully you're tuned in, maybe. I know there's about a 10-second delay, but hopefully you are tuned in and you set that up on purpose, because that looked excellent. I think you were posing for the camera at that point. What else have you to do with a 9-second lead in this race? But he was very much preoccupied with turning his tyres into a hexagon, but still leading the race with an impressive pace underneath him anyway, still setting 129s. So maybe that is the strategy. Maybe shedding weight from the tyres is what I'm going to say. That is, as we see Alan Matthews trying that on a little bit himself. But as we run down towards the bus stop left-hander, it is not going to be enough for him this time round. Not going to be enough for Barry Clayton to make up a bit of a gain. I think Alan Matthews' car is slightly ahead in terms of straight line speed. Of course, this is an open setup championship. Drivers are free to change their setup, whether it be aero, brake performance, suspension stiffness, however they please, to try and benefit them and benefit their race. And it seems to me that Alan Matthews has really tuned into his setup. He's able to break away from Barry Clayton down the straight by the looks of things. If we compare their speed trap time, actually that is completely wrong. So I'm talking complete and utter you know what. Because 134 miles an hour through the speed trap for Barry Clayton and 133 for Alan Matthews. There must be something going on with the timing system for Matt Daly. I'm sure he's not qualified for this event or whatever, because I can't quite see Matt Daly's top speed, because he'd be a very good reference to see how a front runner's car is set up. But yeah, he was. I don't even have a best lap for him, unfortunately, with 3 minutes to go in this race, which is a shame because he's posted some very impressive best laps. But that's not what matters. What matters for him is the points on the board, and he should be taking away many of them this evening, as the back end on that camber through Siemens is certainly providing a challenge for some drivers there. Barry Clayton doing a very good job of catching it there. It reminds me of my Mito into some high-speed corners, actually. He should be able to close back up in no time now, these two battling each other, or enjoying the battle between the two very much indeed. Alan Matthews actually posting a purple 72 that time round, so I'm saying they might be enjoying the battle, but that may not be the case if Alan Matthews keeps at that pace, although the final corner there certainly won't help him. 130.3, still a very impressive lap time indeed. He lost a couple of tenths through that final sector, I can imagine, but maybe we are now starting to see his tyres struggle. I said, I just spent quite a few minutes actually saying about how the tyres probably aren't struggling, and maybe the tyres are now struggling at the end of this race. The back end of a couple of cars seems to be stepping out just a little bit more. We're going to go board once again, shall we try it? Okay, we were a little bit late, but let's watch now as we head into the Rocket. It is a big lock-up for Matt Daly, but it's not quite as spectacular as what we saw just a couple of laps ago. As it appears my graphics card has decided to realise it's got quite warm and has ramped up the fans. Luckily, that shouldn't be affecting the stream, I hope not. No, it seems to be all okay on that end. Hopefully it is on your end. Please do shout at me if I've not noticed that there's been major stuttering or anything like that. But all seems to be good, so we will resume. But another lock-up for Alan Matthews heading in heading through Siemens. Actually, no one facing the wrong direction, which is good to see. But with just a minute on the timing tower left, it will be now or never for Barry Clayton. Really, it's now or never as well for Andrew Brammer. This, of course, doesn't really change the points on offer, but it's good to see him get the overtaken, and I believe Jack Hudson has conceded that as well by looking into this, just like a little bit wide there. So once again, in fact, the top four are staying pretty much identical. In fact, I believe it is identical to what it was in race 1. So even with this reverse grid layout, the four the most competitive drivers really doing a good job of filtering their way through the field here at Anglesey. Speaking of most competitive, we're on board with Matt Daly, who hasn't had too much competition at all, has had a very nice race this weekend here at Anglesey, so we'll have to see what he can do with that extra momentum underneath him for the championship as he heads into the rocket once again. Enough smoke to probably launch a rocket there every time he's headed in, but he went out on the penultimate lap of this race. We're going to go back on board once again with Matt Daly. Well, no, we're not. We're going to go on board with Alan Matthews and Barry Clayton. We will go on board with Matt Daly in just a second to join him for the final lap of this race, but it will have to wait for just a second because we're enjoying the battle going on between Alan Matthews and Barry Clayton, as we did in race 1, as we did pretty much all throughout race 1, as we have done throughout all of race 2 as well. The back end this time going away from Alan Matthews, which may cost him. We have the run down the Tom Price straight. Will it be enough for Barry Clayton to close up? I don't think it will be, unfortunately for him. It could be all she wrote for Barry Clayton in this race. I'm sure he'll settle for another podium. It'll put him in very good stead, actually. If he can take away another 15 points, that will put him around about the P7, P8 in the championship range at the moment, which is a very good weekend for him. He has been able to make up some nice points indeed. Has put a bit of fire back into his run through the championship once again. I don't believe he's going to make quite the headway that the likes of Alan Matthews and Matt Daly have, but we should see him come away with some fairly good results this season, that is for sure. We have some other close drivers indeed. Greg Young finding his way past Paul Millman and Steve Knight closing up to James Atkins, or close to James Atkins at the moment. Jack Hodson still on the tail of Andrew Brammer, and then these two of course enjoying a battle, but we're going to have to go on board with Matt Daly as he heads through the rocket once again. We missed it this time around, we didn't quite see what had happened. There are the lap cars of Greg Young and Paul Millman. Can Paul Millman find a way past Greg Young on this, the final lap of the race? We'll have to wait and see, because that will be good for Paul, for Paul's confidence if he can end up overtaking a pro runner. Will still come home in P3 in the AM running, but still take away a decent amount of points for that as we go back on board once again with Matt Daly heading through the hairpin once again, about 12 seconds clear of the rest of the field at the moment. It has been an absolute masterclass from Matt Daly once again. Unfortunately, no Conkeneath this season for him to enjoy his battles with as he heads through the final corner. Matt Daly then down onto the start-finish straight and will come home to take the race 2 victory as well. Congratulations, Matt, for executing what has been a fantastic weekend of racing here at Anglesey, taking away maximum points for your efforts as well. Hopefully we'll see some victory donuts now as Alan Matthews comes home P2 and Barry Clayton closer this time around comes home P3. Then we have a small wait to the rest of the field. Will we see any victory donuts? We'll have to wait and find out as we see Andrew Rammer waiting to try and find out if he can keep P4, of course. Jack Hodson hunting him down, P4 on the road that is. Andrew Rammer will be coming home P4 in this race, and then Jack Hodson takes the AM race victory there. Congratulations, Jack, for a fantastic drive in race 2 as well. James Atkins running down the other side of the Tom Price straight once again, and then Steve Knight doing the same. Greg Young classified P8, Paul Millman classified P9. Turn to the pits for Matt Daly. James Atkins then heading through the bus stop for the final time this evening, taking home P6 or P5 for the pro running there. Steve Knight comes home to take P2 in the AM running, so that is a fantastic result for Steve there. A good few points on the board this time round. And then Greg Young, I believe, has run out of fuel. No, he hasn't. Sorry, he's just been. He's just, of course, having been on lap down, has come to a close there. Just like the weekend has as well, it has been a fantastic weekend's worth of racing here at the Anglesey circuit. Hope you've enjoyed watching it as much. What? I have several questions. Well, it's not quite we've gone underground now, but that is a spectacular way to end this evening racing. There is certainly some drama for you, some breakdancing Juliettas, which is always good to see, which brings this weekend's racing to a close. Round 3 is at a close now. I hope you've enjoyed watching as much as I've enjoyed commentating. I'll catch you in just a fortnight's time for round 4 of the Julietta TCR Championship and, of course, the single-seater championship next week. So don't go anywhere. Thank you very much for watching and good night.